Hello, friends. Namaskaram. You are most welcome. In today's fast evolving corporate landscape, a massive shift is underway at the top. Why some of the world's most successful CEOs actively walking away from the traditional model of corporate greed and absolute ownership. In this video, we break down the rise of stakeholder capitalism, purpose driven leadership, and why the modern icons are prioritizing long term societal impact over short term financial extraction. We will take help from Bhagavad Gita in order to resolve this conflict. Let's go forward and explore this further. Friends, picture this. You have just hit every single metrics on your board deck. Your stock price is up. Your investors are thrilled. And your name is featured in the business magazines. By every traditional metrics, you have won the corporate game. So why does it feel like you're trapped in a cage of your own making? Welcome to the modern CEO's dilemma. We live in an era where the leadership is measured by hype, scale, relentless control, and the accumulation of the corporate territory. We are taught that to be a great leader, you must own everything, protect your turf fiercely, and feed on endless hunger for more. But beneath the polished surface of the quarterly earnings, reports, and public accolades, a quiet crisis is unfolding. Burnout is at an all time high. Trust in the leadership is fracturing, and executives are discovering that the very trait they use to reach the top, which is ego, greed, and obsessive sense of ownership, are the exact thing destroying their peace of mind and, ironically, their long term business resilience. What if the blueprint for the modern executive leadership isn't hidden in the latest Silicon Valley management book, but a text written over 5,000 years ago? Today we are looking at chapter 2, verse 71 of Bhagavad Gita, and why the most visionary, enduring business leaders of our time are quietly abandoning greed and ownership and finding unprecedented success because of that. Let's break down the ancient wisdom of this verse and translate it into the high stake reality of the modern boardroom. The first trap the Gita identifies is the sense of ownership. As the founder and the CEOs, we love the word my company, my vision, my team, my market share, etc. Psychologically, we fuse our personal identity and the corporate entity into one. When the company wins, our ego inflates. But when the company struggles or when the competitor makes a move, that the same sense of ownership triggers an acute psychological threat, and that is a negative response. When you view your business as your personal possession rather than a temporary trust, every market shift feels like a personal attack. Think about what happens when a CEO operates entirely from a sense of ownership. What you would end up doing first is micromanagement, and micromanagement takes over. Because everything belongs to them, they cannot delegate effectively. They become the bottleneck for every major decision. They also become defensive, replaces adaptability. Innovation requires experimentation, which requires failure. But if failure threatens the CEO's ego and sense of ownership, they will suppress dissenting voices and cling to failing strategies just to protect their pride. Next is isolation. Basically, the isolation deepens for the leader or the CEO. The top gets very lonely because the CEOs surround themselves with yes man who validate their ownership and ego rather than truth tellers who challenges the status quo. The most successful CEOs today are shifting from being owners to being stewards. They realize that they don't truly own the company. They are temporary custodian entrusted with resources, people, and mission at large rather than themselves. The second pillar of verse 71 targets the desire for self enjoyment and greed. In business, greed isn't always about holding money in an offshore account. The executive suite greed often manifests as obsessive pursuit of short-term metrics at an expense of a long-term health. So cutting R&D to boost next quarter is one of the example where the R&D is brought to minimum, and so that you always show profits in the your quarterly report. Exploiting employee bandwidth to squeeze out a few extra percentage points for productivity. Prioritizing personal stock options and compensation packages over the sustainable value of enterprise. For decades, there are different doctrines of shareholder, primacy told us that the sole social responsibility of business is to increase its profit. And for a long time, CEO played that game ruthlessly. But look at the corporate landscape today. Companies built purely on executive greed and short-term extractions are quite fragile. They suffer from massive employee turnover, regulatory crackdown, and total lack of consumer trust. The Bhagavad Gita calls out the calm, which is the desire for self-enjoyment. When leaders' primary motivation becomes feeding their own status, comfort, and the financial accumulation, the organization turns into an instrument for one's person's ego. Notice what verse 71 promises. It promises peace, not stress, not perpetual anxiety, not the frantic need to check your phone at 2 a.m. to see if your stock dropped. It offers you peace. True strategic clarity can only exist in a mind that is not constantly hijacked by greed and self some sort of self-involved mind. When you stop asking what is there for me, how does that make me look, your decision making instantly becomes sharper, more objective, and deeply magnetic to the top tier talent. Now, you might be asking, if I give up greed, ego, and sense of ownership, won't I lose my drive? Won't the company fail if I'm not fiercely aggressive? This is the most common misunderstanding of the ancient philosophy and specifically the Bhagavad Gita text. Detachment does not open apathy. It doesn't mean you stop caring about revenue, growth, or even winning. So, the Sanskrit philosophy or the Bhagavad Gita philosophy, this is known as the asakti, which is non-attachment to the fruit of action, combined with total commitment to the action itself. And here is what this looks like in practice for modern CEO. And in fact, you can follow this in order to change your outlook. First is the fear execution, which is zero personal ego. And that is one thing that you must learn. Fierce execution without any ego. You work harder than anywhere else in the room, but you don't need the credit. When a project succeeds, you spotlight your team. When it fails, you absorb the blow and protect your people. Your self-worth is decoupled from the daily fluctuations of the stock market or public opinion. Number two, the stewardship over possession. You treat the business as a vehicle to serve the customers, empower employees, and solve the meaningful problems. Because you don't view the company as an extension of your ego, you can make clear-eyed, courageous decisions, like pivoting away from legacy product or even stepping down when someone else is better suited to lead the next phase of the growth. Number three, freedom from chronic anxiety. When you release the psychological burden of trying to control every external outcome, your cognitive bandwidth free up. You move from reactive panic to strategic intuitions. You lead from a place of inner stability, which act as calming anchor for your entire executive team during the times of crisis. So, friends, let's circle back to where we started. We live in a hyper competitive, high pressure business world. The temptation to let ego, greed, and obsessive ownership drive your career is immense. And it's what the society tells you us success looks like. But the most successful, respected, and enduring CEOs of our generation, the ones who build their generational institutions rather than flash in the pan empire, have quietly figured out the secret of chapter 2 and verse 71. They realize that ultimate competitive advantage in business isn't ruthless aggression, it's the inner peace. When you give up the crushing weight of ego, when you let go of greed, and when you transition from anxious owner to a purposeful steward, you stop fighting with the market. You start mastering yourself, and when you master yourself, leading the market becomes natural. So if this resonated with you, hit the subscribe button, friends. Share this video with fellow leaders and let me know in the comments, where in your business are you holding on too tightly? Thanks for watching. Lead with purpose, and I will catch you soon in the next one.